Hey everyone, this is the Square Autistic speaking. Today, I told you I was gonna show you Big Jimmy. Big Jimmy. Jimmy. And Greg. Greg had the butt. So, Big Jimmy. Wait, hold on. Big Jimmy. And Greg sleep with me in the bed. Put them over here for now. And Jimmy stays in here with me. Okay. This video, I wanted to go over what led me to seek out a diagnosis. During my research on autism, especially watching YouTube videos from actually autistic people really helped me to understand more about my brain and why I function the way I do. I met someone with autism a few years ago. I could tell they had a higher need of support on how they acted during the conversation. It didn't feel like they were awkward, but it definitely felt different than what I've experienced in other conversations with other people. I had learned they were diagnosed with autism, and that made me wonder if I was too. I vaguely brought up this idea to my dad, who immediately shot the idea down. So I stopped looking into it for a while, like at least a year, I think. Because when people shoot down my ideas or my thoughts, I lose the self-esteem that I had when I had opened it up about it in the first place. About a year or two later, I was in the shower. I suddenly thought, maybe I am autistic. I think it had something to do with how I have a routine when I'm in the shower. Like how I wash my hair and my body. I have a step-by-step system that helps me function and be clean. And no, it's not OCD. I've been OCD before, and it's not at all the same. I started watching videos on YouTube from people who are on the spectrum and reading about traits that made me feel connected to myself more than I ever had been before. So I self-diagnosed myself with high-functioning autism, also known as level 1 support. But I want to add, many autistic people have long advocated for the terms high and low functioning to be abandoned due to their inaccuracy. By using this sort of terminology comes with assumptions that a person's abilities or strengths may not match what the individual is capable of. High functioning presumes the person isn't struggling, and low functioning presumes the person isn't intelligent. In other words, just because a person has typical or expected intellectual abilities does not necessarily mean they have good functioning skills for their age. So after I self-diagnosed, I made a video coming out as a self-diagnosed individual, and I only shared it with a select few, of course my dad being one of them, and I'll come back to that in a moment. You see, my mom was viewed by many as a hypochondriac. Whether she actually was or not, I will never know because she's deceased and has been for a little over 17 years now. I believe she was undiagnosed autistic. History between my parents was pretty toxic on both ends, and the more I learn and understand about not just autism, but what they both went through, and not just them growing up, but being married to each other, it just didn't work out, and that was probably for the best. My mom's side of the family is extremely toxic and cult-like. I'm surprised my mom didn't have more worse mental issues than she did. But my parents, they just got dealt a really shitty hand because of it, and I really feel for them. Whether or not she was really a hypochondriac or not. While growing up, anytime I tried explaining anything of what I felt or what I was going through, my dad would say that because my mom was a hypochondriac, I could come one too if I'm not careful. This made it difficult to speak to him about anything, and it made me feel like anything I said didn't matter. I would be seen as fake, even though for me it was real. I'm not excusing his behavior back then, but it does make sense why he acted this way. After showing my dad the self-diagnosis video, he told me that getting a professional diagnosis is important, and he really wanted me to pursue this, but I really did not want to. But I gave it some thought. I started looking into what steps to getting a diagnosis are and researching people's experiences and what doctors gave them their diagnosis, if they listed. I primarily looked on Reddit, and a single doctor kept coming up. So I reached out to them and I spoke to them on the phone. I didn't have insurance, so for self-pay it was still quite a lot to pay, but I've heard about people paying much more. The diagnosis experience. The whole process for me was a bit traumatic. I had to recall my whole life in a very short amount of time. I had to fill out a few papers on my history as well as mental and physical health histories. There were questions in there that really brought back memories that I had buried in the back of my mind. It tore me up and I started having flashbacks again. It was truly hard for me. I ended up writing about 36 pages or so on why I thought I was autistic. The doctor told me it was possible she would have to charge me for the time spent reading the pages, so I was able to shorten it to about 28 pages. But I wanted to add, if you want to seek out a professional diagnosis, please do not try to research how the diagnostic process works, especially during the session where they observe you in person. I know that it's different for each doctor, the process is different. So I can't say it for that it will be the same. Other people explaining their diagnostic experience, totally different from mine. But knowing how they observe you in person can actually make you fail. I say that because I constantly see people on social media talking about how the doctor observed them, and it upsets me because the process is observing how you react to certain things, and if you know what it is, it can ruin the experience and affect your ability to be able to get diagnosed. And believe me, I did try to research before going in, because before I do anything, I have to know what to expect. But I'm so glad I didn't find anything. I don't know how I didn't find anything, but I didn't before my appointment, even though it was really nerve-wracking for sure. A while after my diagnosis, my dad said it made sense, that I had a very black and white way of thinking when I was a child. I think he might have just had so much trauma with my mom and her side of the family that his brain couldn't comprehend that I could actually be autistic. I don't know. Either way, I wish my parents had known about my autism growing up. I think after my dad learned of my diagnosis, his brain just needed time to process it. But I'm still not sure he has really learned much about what autism is. Like, past the stigma of autistic traits and the stereotypes, but only time will tell. I'm not going to force it on him. It took me at least a couple months to really understand and accept my diagnosis. It was like it had to soak into my brain or something. I hear about how people who have been diagnosed with autism or ADHD, they go through something called imposter syndrome, where they feel like a fraud and they doubt themselves. despite the evidence and how they have always been. I've never felt that way. I don't think I ever will feel that way because specifically, I know how my brain is, and it's not the way everyone processes. Like, no one processes the way I process. At least in the majority of, like, neurotypical people. I've learned that the hard way. I'm still learning about myself and traits that I have always felt and exhibited, but not that everybody else experiences. I might even need to do an update video in the future because I still feels like I'm kind of processing it all. Please note, I am in no way a medical professional and I cannot diagnose anyone. I am just explaining my experiences. This is a Square Autistic signing off, and remember, squares are cool.